Hi, everyone. I'm Jennifer Schlueter, Dean of Graduate Studies here at the Columbus College of Art and Design, a nonprofit art and design college that has been a creative force within Central Ohio for 140 years. Welcome to tonight's event, which is part of CCAD's Visiting Artists and Scholars series. We are thrilled to be speaking with Los Angeles-based artist and educator Audrey Chan about the role of art and storytelling in the fight for social justice. Each semester, CCAD welcomes guest artists and scholars to teach workshops and seminars, engage in one-on-one mentoring and studio visits with graduate and undergraduate students, and lecture as part of the college's Visiting Artists and Scholars series. While we are sad we cannot gather together on campus here in downtown Columbus in the Discovery District as we typically would, we are still happy we can take this time to be together online. Before we jump into tonight's event and I introduce our visiting artists, I want to share a few housekeeping notes. First, we're recording tonight's event so we can share it on our website for those who weren't able to join us tonight. Tonight's event is in a webinar format and all lines are muted and videos are off other than for the speakers. We will have time to answer your questions at the end, so please feel free to use the Q&A function down there at the bottom of your screen throughout the discussion to submit your questions. You're also welcome to use the chat function throughout to share any reactions or comments. We want to make sure that we recognize some very special organizations. CCAD's Visiting Artists and Scholars series is made possible thanks to support from the Greater Columbus Arts Council, the Ohio Arts Council, and the Skestos Endowment Fund for the Visiting Artists and Lectures. Now, I'm excited to introduce tonight's speaker. Audrey Chan, originally from Chicago, Illinois, is a Los Angeles-based artist and educator. Her research-based projects use drawing, painting, video, and public art to challenge dominant historical narratives through allegories of power, place, and identity. She received an MFA from California Institute of the Arts and a BA with honors from Swarthmore College. She was commissioned by LA Metro to create a large-scale public artwork for the future Little Tokyo Arts District Metro Station opening in 2022. She was a visiting artist faculty in the program in art at California Institute of the Arts and the inaugural artist in residence at the ACLU of Southern California. Please join me in welcoming Audrey Chan.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much, Jennifer, and thank you, Marla, and all of the CCAD community for the invitation to speak with you all tonight. And thank you so much for taking the time to watch this lecture. I'm just going to jump right in. As Jennifer mentioned, I am based in Los Angeles, and let me just make sure I have everything going. But I was originally, I grew up in a suburb outside of Chicago called Oak Park. And thinking about storytelling, I wanted to go back a couple years to a piece that I made for a show that was at Otis College of Art and Design. And this was in 2013, and the piece is called Center of the Universe, Ama Detail. And I had never made a piece like this before. It's about 13 feet tall by about 44 feet wide. It's a vinyl banner. And at the time, my paternal grandmother, who I call Ama, was experiencing dementia. And so she was experiencing these like slippages of memory between past and present. And so it's as if she was living her childhood and being in her 90s with my family at the same time. And I remember when I was invited to be in the show, which I was with my collaborator, Ilana Mann, I was thinking about what it meant to work at a grand scale, but with a kind of delicate touch, and what it meant to take someone who was monumental to me as a person and an influence since I grew up with my grandmother. You'll see there she's shown sitting on actually the hospital, Princess Women's Hospital. It was like a modernist architecture in downtown Chicago, and I'm there as a baby. She moved to Chicago when I was a baby, and I was like, how do you reconcile monumentality of scale with a kind of intimate relationships? And so those were kind of the questions at the heart of this piece. And it was the first time I've worked, yeah, it's the first time I've worked at this scale. And I developed a process of making sketchbook drawings that I would turn into vector graphics. And in a way, it was a way to compensate for the fact that I wasn't working out of a studio at the time, but I did have like my computer, and there was a relatively short install period. So this was my way of developing a kind of multi-layered composition, but with an economy of means. And it ended up being really important for work that I would do later on. But so in terms of storytelling, I'm really interested in this kind of like nonlinear uh, way that people and places and things can coexist and talk to each other that may not belong together in real space and time, but in the space of these compositions can kind of be like free floating stories that can be assembled and immersive for people who are experiencing them. So the Chicago connection is there for sure in the buildings on the right. And a few years after that, I was invited. I was on a short list for LA Metro's upcoming commissions for public artworks that would appear in train stations. And I was invited to compete um, to make artwork for the Little Tokyo Arts District station that is currently under construction right now. And these are two of the 14 panels. Each of them is about 12 by 13.5 feet. And they're going to ultimately appear on the walls of the subway train station. So you'll go down a set of escalators or elevator, go on the platform, and this pair of 7 panels will face another set of 7 panels. And when I first heard about the piece and the commission, I thought about the incredible scale of experiencing this work. And I thought about allegorical cycles that I'd seen in more like religious contexts, and how rather than being like 14 discrete um, pieces, it could be experienced as a piece in the round. And so you'll notice that along the bottom of these panels, there's actually a procession. And so this procession changes from panel to panel. So it's at its base, it's inspired by the Japanese Bon Odori dance, which is like a Buddhist circle dance to honor ancestors. And in this case, you'll see examples of dancers during Fandango Obon, which is a multicultural intersectional interpretation of Obon that is performed in Little Tokyo and I think other sites throughout the city. And then at other times, a procession is like a parade or a protest or a march. But what's continuous within these panels is the idea of like people moving through public space and expressing their communities and values. And so this piece is called Willpower Allegory. And the title has the acronym WPA, which is a reference to the Works Progress Administration. Because when I first started thinking about this piece, I thought about the legacy of Executive Order 9066 that was ordered by Franklin Delano Roosevelt during World War II, that ordered the incarceration of Japanese and Japanese Americans along the West Coast, and how the Public Works and the Federal Art Project that fell under the WPA as a government-sponsored public art initiative just followed like a few years after that kind of violence committed against such against like a single ethnic group. And I was like, how can I pick up the pieces of that representational mode of creating these images that purport to represent America and American values, but update it to today, but also allow history to come into the piece as well. So you'll see moments like from the Women's March. This is my friend Devin Suno's mother, grandmother, and aunt. Devin's grandmother was incarcerated during World War II. You have moments like from early Little Tokyo history, and also there are other communities represented, like the unhoused community in Skid Row, and also activists and organizers and artists based there. There's also the indigenous people of the LA Basin, the Tongva Nation, are represented, as well as when scenes from when Little Tokyo was a Bronzeville district during World War II, and like a hub of the African American community in LA and the heart of the Central Avenue jazz scene, and also scenes from the Arts District, and also like amazing punk band called Party Boys. So this piece is going to open to the public in 2022, and I worked on it for about 4 years. So again, that issue of time this was a way I had never worked before in terms of building out this narrative that would be a permanent piece in public space and would become part of people's lives in an incredibly rich neighborhood. Little Tokyo is also just a few blocks from City Hall. So I needed to think about what would this piece mean to people who would encounter it every day on their commute to work. And also I wanted there to be layers to unpack for people who would just see it for the first time, and this being like their introduction to LA stories. And so this is a look inside the station. I got to walk the future subway lines that are being constructed right now. It was a bit of like a time travel experience. This is what it's approximately going to look like at street level. And just to put it into historical context, across from First Avenue and Central Avenue is actually this corner. And this is a historical photo showing Japanese Americans being boarded onto buses to be sent to internment camps. So it's an incredibly charged site. And so I worked really closely with organizers and historians and community culture bearers to find out what stories they wanted to carry forward into the future and for future generations. So that level of collaboration and storytelling is really important to me. I just wanted to show this quick like 30-second video because it shows my digital process. Most of the work I've been doing for the past couple of years has been between like my iPad and Adobe Illustrator. But this is just a little promo video that shows that process. My name is Audrey Chan, and I'm creating artwork for the Metro Regional Connector Little Tokyo Arts District Station. My process involves a lot of like moving things around, changing the scale, seeing different relationships that can happen between different images. This is the first time I've worked on a piece that could be considered permanent, and so it made me think, what is worth committing to history? LA Metro is fantastic because like this is my first ever public art commission, and they really make a process that kind of initiates artists at different levels like into the world of public art. And like the civic and public art space has been just like an amazing space to work in the past couple of years, because I've long had an interest in the relationship between art and political movements and political identity. And here are two of the artists that have really been influential to my work. Barbara Carrasco, who I'm happy to call a friend now. She's still based in Los Angeles. She was a volunteer and the resident designer and artist of the United Farm Workers movement. Most, if you've heard of Cesar Chavez or Dolores Huerta, um, it's an incredibly important labor movement in California. And I love the aesthetic of kind of like graphic illustrations that could be screen prints or yeah, the language of like print and even like animated film is really important for me. I'm less interested in drawing that exists as an object and more drawings that can be like mobilized for different ways of like circulating in the world. And Emory Douglas, who is the Minister of Culture for the Black Panther Party, he also did the layout for their newspaper. And his work is so relevant right now. This particular image is about a teenager who worked with the Black Panther Party and who was shot by police. It's a familiar story even today. And I really appreciate he's holding a pamphlet called Community Control of Police, which is something that we still need to demand. So they were in the back of my mind when I was finishing the LA Metro project. It's actually going into fabrication right now. But I was thinking about like, what do I want to do next? And I learned about the ACLU of Southern California. They were starting an inaugural Artist in Residence program. And just so many things lit up for me when I read this RFQ or request for qualifications, because they wanted an artist to be embedded with them for an entire year to work on all different kinds of projects. And I was like, wow, I would love to create like political graphics for them, to do anything to amplify their work. They are really on the forefront of defending constitutional rights, civil liberties, civil rights, and there is a ACLU regional chapter in every state of the United States. I think their national office may get the most press, but it's really the advocates working on the state, local, county level that are having incredible impact even on your daily lives, whether or not you realize it. And this is their theory of change for their particular affiliate. And they work on a number of issues like immigrants' rights, First Amendment rights, criminal justice, police practices, economic justice, LGBT, and reproductive justice. And let's see, am I forgetting any? I think government transparency as well. And what I was really interested in learning about, I mean, when I was an undergrad, I was trying to decide between being an artist and pursuing like a public policy career. And so many years later, it's this residency in a way like brought those twin interests together. Like I could be an artist within a public policy space. And I was embedded with the staff of the communications and media advocacy team. And so their job is to message out the work of the organization. And so that involves working with the press, developing like political graphics for digital organizing. It means making videos, oftentimes like working with clients from cases to share their stories out. And in addition to their staff, there's of course the lawyer advocacy lawyers, there's the policy advocates, there's people who are doing leading community organizing, and researchers. And it was really exciting to be in meetings where they were discussing ongoing cases and projects. Sometimes they're like a specific issue, they'd be advocating for it for years before an outcome would happen. And in some cases, it would need to be like a matter of weeks to turn around a really urgent issue. And so it was definitely it was amazing to just be kind of dropped into that environment and working with them for the past year. And this is just to give you a sense of like their history. They're approaching their centennial. The ACLU of Southern California is the first affiliate, regional affiliate apart from the national office that's based in New York. And Upton Sinclair, the famous writer, was helped to start the affiliate when he was arrested for reading the Bill of Rights at a gathering of San Pedro longshoremen who were advocating for labor rights. They defended the rights of Japanese Americans who were incarcerated during World War II. They worked with Sir Lady Java, who's a trans pioneer and performer. The LAPD was enforcing Rule Number 9 that made it illegal to dress to cross-dress, basically making it illegal to be trans or to be in drag. They worked to, they sued on behalf of residents with disabilities for equal access to public transportation. So kneeling buses came about as a result of that. This is during the Muslim ban. Ali Vaigan was on a plane from Iran to LAX when the Muslim ban went into effect, and he was sent back. And this is actually my friend Marjan. This is her uncle. I found out all about all this over Facebook when it was going on. She and her family contacted ACLU SoCal lawyers to work to fight the Muslim ban and to help bring Ali to LA. And Jose Beo's a poet, activist, student in Kern County who read a poem that was critical of ICE at a public hearing, and he was summarily arrested, and the ACLU defended his First Amendment rights to free him. So part of the work that I was doing was actually trying to do some archival research, since they're always really focused on urgent issues of the moment. It was an opportunity for someone to come in and kind of step back and look at what kind of stories are coming out from the history that we can put forward to the public as they're approaching their centennial year. And in the meantime, I was also, we're trying to find ways for me to support existing campaigns. So for example, this one is from the ICE is Not Welcome Here campaign. They do a lot of work with public education and know your rights. And in particular, they wanted to support immigrant communities by educating them about the illegal and deceptive tactics used by ICE agents. They were pretending to be police. A lot of them wear bulletproof vests that say police on the back of them, even though they're not, and pretending to be probation officers and lying to people, telling them that they had car troubles to get them to open their door. All these different tactics to basically frighten people into putting themselves at risk of searches and potential deportation. And so I worked with the comms team and the legal advocates to develop these series of posters and graphics that were bilingual. This says, this is our community, we know our rights, we do not consent, ICE is not welcome here. And they really were excited about this idea of a Latinx girl who they call Nina, who would be the kind of face of the campaign, and she would be shown as, confident, she knows her rights, she's standing up alongside her community, armed with this knowledge. And something that I learned a lot about over the course of the residency was the importance of narrative change, and how that's a big part of their communication strategy. Just if you look on the right, it's just like a screen grab of some recent LA Times headlines about ICE, and you kind of get the sense that it's like ICE is this kind of like ominous and threatening force. And oftentimes, immigrant communities are shown mostly as victims within that space, and vulnerable and disempowered. And so they really wanted to counter that through narrative change work on this campaign. So um, Nina was this way of kind of like delivering the message of the steps that you can take when ICE is at the door. So here's in more detail. They're basically like instruct, like how to or how to respond and what are your legal rights. So verifying who's at the door. If they say that they're police, they're checking for a warrant or identification, documenting the interaction, and empowering bystanders outside the home to document ICE raids, and also encouraging people to like send this documentation to the ACLU as evidence. And this is actually a zine that was a community handbook that you could print out on one page. So that's why it's half of it's upside down. You're meant to fold it and cut it so it can fold into a little handbook, but it is a guide with like rapid response hotlines and more detailed legal information. And for me, I was like really excited to be able to kind of like provide the graphic identity for this campaign. And it has a lot of other different aspects as well. And so I started working on this right before California went into lockdown for COVID. So everything from this point forward has been made in quarantine. And we shifted pretty seamlessly to working remotely, but I'm glad I had a few months to get to know everybody. And speaking of COVID, there is also a strong push to make sure that the voices of the most impacted communities and most vulnerable communities were being heard at this time. For example, people in ICE detention and in jails, and also people in homeless shelters. And so this was really a group effort between the comms team, myself drawing portraits, and the advocates and organizers who are conducting interviews with people about their experiences of not being provided PPE, not being able to socially distance, basically being at great risk for contracting COVID in their circumstances. And these interviews were conducted with people upon their release when they were in a position to be able to speak on the conditions. And for example, Oscar was released like when he had already contracted COVID in Riverside County Jail, and Sofia Bahena was a named plaintiff on an ACLU lawsuit to sue to reduce the populations of the detention centers. And these videos and actions and petitions and graphics were a lot of them were targeted at Governor Gavin Newsom of California, since he held the most power to reduce prison populations, to reduce the populations of ICE detention. And also there's still going on in California transfers from like county and city jails into ICE. So it's like this constant inflow into this incredibly problematic treatment of undocumented people. I mean, problematic is an understatement. People are, there have been reports of people being sprayed with chemicals, sexual and physical assault, the child and family separation that we all know about. And so these are all still issues that are ongoing, and they still need a lot of public pressure on officials, Democrat or Republican or whoever is in office, to put an end to it. And so I wanted to show you 2 of the videos of this series called On the Line: COVID Conversations. So this is Briseida Salazar, who speaks about her experience as a mother in immigration detention.
A lot of our fear was dying and not seeing our families, because this is a fatal virus, you know, and at the time they didn't have any knowledge of the virus. So it was very scary for us to think this could be the last place, could be the last human contact that you have with people. You might not be able to get home to your kids. I really think that this experience has not only affected me, but my 1-year-old. He was very small, and, you know, he was coming out, it was very different. It was my son. He didn't necessarily recognize me at first, and you know, it's little things that, like, now I see him and he's grown up so much in such short period of time, and I feel very overwhelmed that I've missed some of his milestones and some of the things that, you know, he's learned on my time away. Like, he's not used to calling me mom anymore. He calls me Bree, so it's a little different, and it's a little hard to hear him call me by my name. But I'm very thankful that my son was able to go to my mom instead of the system. We're not just a number, you know. We're human beings. We deserve to be treated as human beings. They can't just come in and break us apart from our families and make us go through all this pain, especially at this time right now, when not only is San Diego in crisis, but the whole world.
And here's the next slide. Next video is by Joyce Van Noordtreek, who is in a Orange County homeless shelter, emergency shelter.
Hi, Joyce.
Hi.
So I just wanted to check in with you. I mean, while the rest of us are self-isolating in our own homes, you're in an emergency shelter, self-isolating with about 200 other people. Can you tell me what your biggest concern is?
I'm gonna die here.
Oh, Joyce.
I honestly feel that I'll take my last breath here. My pulmonologist, he says, Joyce, if you get this, your chance of surviving is very, very low. I have to be where my oxygen machine is. It's not a case that I could go somewhere in the building and keep myself away. It's not an option for me to feel comfortable and safe here.
Are you able to sort of describe for me what it's like in this shelter?
It's awful. I'm in the women's dorm, and there's 68 other women in here. If we're supposed to be spaced 6 feet apart, no, we're not. Our beds are 3 feet apart. There's absolutely no way possible for me to do like the CDC says and be 6 feet away from somebody else.
I wanted to ask you, Joyce, what are your hopes and dreams for the future?
Being able to be in my own place, and if I want to grow flowers, grow flowers. If I want to grow my own vegetables, grow my own vegetables. I want to be able to feel like I can live my life in safety. Being safe.
So all of these testimonies were attached to actions such as petitions for people to sign on and support the ACLU's work, for example, to support like a housing first policy rather than a shelter first policy in California. And I think it's like these stories should be on the front page of every newspaper right now. And it's really these individual stories that help us understand the impact of what's going on with COVID. The numbers can be so overwhelming. And these stories are overwhelming too, but it's about recognizing our common humanity. And these were a series of portraits of Asian American and Pacific Islander activists and civil rights leaders during Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month. And this was like actually really inspiring, empowering for me since I grew up in the Midwest and I didn't necessarily feel part of an Asian American community, much like outside of my own family. And a lot of my education about Asian American history has like happened since I graduated from grad school and lived in Los Angeles and connected with people who are part of the movement. For example, Mia Yamamoto is amazing trans criminal justice lawyer who was incarcerated during World War II. Nai Norn and Paul Sok came to the US as Cambodian refugees, and they were both caught up in the justice system, criminal justice system as teenagers and had to fight to not be deported. And they're both amazing activists and organizers now. Wong Kim Ark's Supreme Court case helped establish birthright citizenship for children of immigrants born in the US. Like I didn't know about his story before this year. And this was against the backdrop of increasing xenophobia and hate crimes and hate speech against Asian Americans. So we really wanted to lift up that Asian Americans have always been part of civil rights work in the US, even if they weren't the most visible. Grace Lee Boggs, whose career, her career as like a thinker and revolutionary is incredible, based in Detroit. Yuri Kochiyama, who's close with the Malcolm X and the Black Power movement. So it's a mix of historical figures like Larry Itliong, who co-led the United Farm Workers movement, and High Chief Loa Pele Falatogo, who's based in Southern California and supports the American Samoan community currently. And this is just a little video about my process as of late. I kind of like live on my iPad Pro and use an app called Procreate. So it creates these little animations as I draw. And it has really kind of opened up my drawing practice in terms of, it's really makes it so that I can like output my artwork to serve a lot of different purposes. Like this is in the annual report for ACLU this year. So through the residency, I've been a kind of like an in-house illustrator. I'm not trained as an illustrator, but it's like really exciting for me. I used to do like editorial cartoons in undergrad, so it's like reminiscent of that. But also like I'm still learning like watercolor on paper, and in Procreate I can kind of work in a non-linear way. I feel like even when I did edit video, like editing was my favorite part of the process. So it's this working digitally like allows me to like edit as I work as well. And these were portraits made for Pride Month, and ACLU SoCal wanted to lift up Black LGBTQ like past clients of theirs. For example, Juice and Navi Husky, our trans siblings who faced gender discrimination at Coachella when they tried to use the public restrooms. Christine Lilly Renee Wood was denied access to the women's locker rooms at Crunch Fitness. And so she was part of a lawsuit for their violations of her civil rights. And the NorCal office wanted to highlight Miss Janetta Arya Saeed and Honey Mahogany, who co-founded the Transgender District. This is the first transgender district in the world. It's in San Francisco's Tenderloin, and at the site of the Compton's cafeteria riots, which was actually which predated the Stonewall riots in New York. That was from 1966. So it's a community space of like healing and reparations. And so I was really happy to work on all these portraits. They're just amazing individuals to lift up and for people to learn more about them. So a lot of these were circulating online as social media campaigns. This is the annual report I was telling you about. I embedded an image inspired by the mass civil uprisings of the summer after George Floyd and Breonna Taylor's murders. And yeah, it was this, I'm kind of interested in this illustration and graphic design opportunities I've had as part of the residency, because I love to see how like drawings and graphics can be like mobilized with information. And so this was just like an example of that. And something that's really exciting that's happening right now, I can finally talk about it. I've been working with the ACLU to design a mural for the facade of their building on 8th Street in the Westlake neighborhood of downtown LA. And so it's actually in progress right now. I'm working with an amazing team of fabricators, and right now they're transferring the line work onto the building, and it's going to be done in about 2 weeks. But these are just some of the details. And so we're lifting up people from ACLU SoCal's past and present, and also their community partners. So I mentioned Jose Bello and Ali Vagan and Marjan Vagan earlier. And so they're in here, and it's really about the intersectional nature of their work and making visible their work in community on the site of their building. And so having worked on the LA Metro project, I was able to kind of tap into that work that I did to figure out how to create this layered narrative. As on a visual composition formal level, the hardest part of developing this work was working around all of these windows, because it's like a functional building that wasn't necessarily designed with a mural in mind. So I wanted to find a way to kind of like build these portraits in iconography and like references to mutual aid. For example, this is Theo Henderson, who's an unhoused activist in LA. This is Ramona Ripston, who was an incredibly influential executive director of ACLU SoCal for several decades. You might recognize Patrice Kahn-Cullors, who's one of the 3 Black queer founders of the Black Lives Matter movement. And so it's really about like Southern California stories, and like the ACLU SoCal is involved in legalizing street vending, and their building is like it's really close to like MacArthur Park, and like one of the hearts of the immigrant community in LA. So Janaea, Future Khan, Patrice, and Mark Anthony Johnson are signing Black Lives Matter in ASL as an expression of solidarity. This piece is also made in response to the abuse of force by police. And also this gesture in particular is in solidarity with people with disabilities who are disproportionately experience violence and fatalities at the hands of the police. And for example, Teresa Cruz lost her son, Cesar Cruz, to police. So this piece is aspirational in the sense of highlighting people who are like working for a better tomorrow, but it's also in this case, it's a memorial portrait and a way of keeping his memory alive. And throughout, the background is a park inspired by like a county park in LA, and there are healing native plants throughout, and you'll see dandelion seeds flying all around that are inspired by a poem by Mark Anthony Johnson called The Crop, that talks about how dandelions, even though they're regarded as weeds, are actually incredible healing plants that form deep tap roots and proliferate themselves through their seeds. And so they're a really strong metaphor for organizing and community building. And I just wanted to kind of close the loop with the first slide that I showed, because I'm always interested in this, in the personal and political kind of like reverberating with each other. And so like my work in communities that are outside of my immediate community are very much influenced by like my work dealing with my own family. I'm a mother now. And a lot of, when I choose projects and think about what I'm working on and what images I'm putting out into the world, I'm thinking about like, what do I want my son to see? Since, you know, it took me a long time to kind of take ownership of like an artist's power to create images in the world. I'm still learning, for example, a lot of things like outside of the Western art historical canon that are so important to me that I didn't have access to, or that I didn't know to seek out. And on the right is a recent portrait of my grandma that I created as an altar for a Dia de los Muertos exhibition at Self-Help Graphics in Boyle Heights in LA. And so it was one of many contemporary ofrendas created by artists this year. And so she continues to be a muse for me. My dad would tell me about her stories of being like a young widowed mother in communist China. And it's learning about her story just really made it clear to me that we're all political. We're all born into like a political reality, and a lot of our legacy is like how we choose to navigate it. And so there's the piece on the left was from a series called An Illustrated Vocabulary of Tenderness. And now that I think about it, I'm like, I feel like that title could cover a lot of the works that I do, like tenderness and care and intimacy are something that I really want people to feel when they see the work, even if it's like a 3-story tall mural. I want there to be that kind of tenderness to be present in the work. So yeah, so that wraps up my presentation. Thank you all so much. Happy to take any questions.
Fantastic. Oh, Audrey, thank you so much.
Thank you.
We're going to move over to some of the questions right now. And as we do that, I'm thinking about what you just said about tenderness and care and sort of vulnerability in your work, and also the notion of narrative change that you talked about in the Columbus Alive article yesterday, especially around the ICE is Not Welcome Here campaign, the way a work of art can intervene and change a story, which is the ways that we understand ourselves and our power in the world. And I'm also thinking a lot about your really good question in relationship to public art, but what is worth committing to history? You're grappling with the personal, political, shifting stories, and also making space for the telling of new and unheard ones in your work. And we have a lot of questions stacking up that are grappling with those things. So let me hop over here. So the first question I'm looking at here is a student is asking about the ways that you would advise artists and other creatives who want to spread awareness for important issues like social justice, and at the same time don't want to cause further pain or division than what already exists. So what's your advice for folks in this way?
I think that's such an important question because I think trauma is often, and the reproduction of trauma in terms of really challenging social issues is, even just thinking, especially with Black Lives Matter and the fact that so many people have only responded to the epidemic of racist policing and police violence when presented with extremely graphic depictions of it in like cell phone videos. And on the one hand, there's awareness, but on the other hand, it's like, what does it take to get people to care? And at what point do people, what happens to us like as people when we become desensitized to those images and they become commonplace? And so, especially in my work with communities in LA, a big push is to represent people like in the fullness of their dignity. And so I think it's really like a judgment call for like the individual artist. And there are so many ways to make work and share it right now. I think like so many of the most powerful, especially like viral images, like circulated like over Instagram. And I think it's also important to like locate where you are in relation to the subjects you're representing, and to like own your subject position, you know. And that can happen in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, for sure. This relates to another question that's sitting in here, in terms of feeling intimidated by a subject matter, either by the content or by the form. So the question is really about working in large scale, but also I think it can equally apply to working in really intimate personal scale as well. So can you talk about how you grapple with that?
Oh yeah, I mean, a blank page is the most intimidating thing. And like I'm showing all the projects like in their finished state. And so it's really not necessarily showing like all the struggles that led to the creation of these images. But I think dealing with like self-doubt is part of the daily work of an artist. I deal with it like every hour of every day too. And so I don't think feeling intimidated should be any reason to not do the work. It just, honestly, it means that you care. And I think feeling intimidated means that you feel compelled to do something, but you don't know yet that you can do it. But you can't really until you try. I mean, it sounds like a Hallmark card, but like, for example, with the first piece that I showed, that huge vinyl banner, I was very intimidated even to attempt to represent my own relationship with my grandma. It felt like impossible. And I feel like even when the piece was done, it was unsatisfactory. And I've had to like learn to accept that a piece does what it does, and it may not do everything that you ever wanted, but you have to like respect what your work is doing and to just keep moving forward and to build on in the next project.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. And a couple of folks are also asking us to think a little bit about the impact of the subject matter on you. So one person is commenting that hearing other people's testimonies that are heart-wrenching has inspired them to become more involved and informed about the different movements going on in the US right now, and how they can help, which is fantastic. But also, what's the effect on you of sort of sitting with these stories and telling them over and over again?
Well, for example, like Briseda's story about being separated from her son as a child was just gut-wrenching to me as a relatively new mother myself. And on the one hand, it's like you have to hold that testimony and that pain, but also kind of make a separate like calm space to make the artwork in. And so it's, so in order to do those portraits, I needed to just like spend time with their image and just like pour as much love as I could into those drawings. And I had to be in, so a lot of the work around doing the work that I've been doing this year has been about creating kind of a mental health space for myself, because it can be really challenging to represent certain subject matter without it feeling like totally emotionally overwhelming. So like I'm a very like deadline driven person, so sometimes you just have to like I would have to like play music or something to kind of like create a space in which I can do work like in the midst of, you know, everything that's going on right now.
Well, let's talk about process a little bit. One questioner is asking about your process working with communication teams on these projects. What advice do you have about how folks can collaborate, especially for artists?
Yeah, I think it took a few months for us to figure out like what my role on the team was, because I was there for like a finite amount of time and we're each trying to figure out like what I brought to the table and like what potentials there were. And so at times, especially for the like social media graphics, I was very much like in the role of an illustrator. And like for the AAPI Heritage Month, like I was helping to do the research. And for the mural, it was very like a very porous process because I had experience doing public art before, and so I could help them like build capacity. I think capacity is like a word that's used a lot at ACLU, since they are always having to figure out how to be strategic with their use of staff and resources to have like targeted work that can have the most impact. And it's, I think artists have to figure that out as well. Like what is your capacity? What are the skills that you bring, whether it's like drawing or like visionary work or whatnot. But I very much came into the residency as a like, how can I help you all kind of position. And so I have just been trying to navigate that, but that's kind of the mindset I took going into it. So a lot of times like they're leading the process in terms of deciding like what's important and where I can plug in. And then for the mural, it's been more of a back and forth in terms of like me leading at times in terms of like the formal choices like around the mural and whatnot, and navigating that process. I don't know if that answered the question really, but I think like being really open to collaboration and also having like thick skin, because like when you're working on projects that are like 100% defined by your interests, you are the one who's you know, you have like full ownership of that. But like when you're working as part of a team, you're like part of a larger process, and people may need to, you know, have the criticism is in the interest of it serving that purpose. So that's kind of how I've been approaching it.
Fantastic. I think we have time to do one more, and I think it's a process question. So I'm going to combine a couple here. One questioner is saying, you say you aren't trained in illustration, but what are you trained in? And another questioner is saying, how do you adjust your drawing style depending upon what you're working on at the time, or do you try and sort of have a kind of continuity? So can you talk about your background and your style?
Yeah, let's see, what am I trained in? I guess I've always drawn since I was like really little. And so drawing has been like such a constant part of, I shouldn't say that, because when I went to grad school at CalArts, I stopped drawing for like years. I I wanted to like learn performance and video and figure out more what it meant to like deal with like political subject matter directly in my work. So that took the form of like found footage video and like organizing symposia on feminism. And it really took like doing work around like Asian American representation to like start drawing again. And then I was like, wow, why did I stop doing this cold turkey? And so all the work that I've been doing has been a like post years past grad school kind of thing. So I pivot a lot in my work. Like I guess also the drawing style. I don't really know how to articulate how I choose to draw in which way, but I mean, I'm really influenced by like hand-drawn animation. Like that's something I come back to a lot. Like I love Barbara Carrasco's work. I love Carrie James Marshall. I'm less interested in developing like a house style or like a signature style. I mean, my projects are more driven by like the research and the topics that I'm working on, but I'm still kind of in progress in terms of figuring out how to articulate why I draw in a certain way at different times.
I love it. In progress is the way to be.
Yeah.
I think this
Check
is
back
what we're
with me
going to
on
wrap.
that.
I know, we will. Thank you so much, Audrey.
Thank you.
I think this is where we're going to wrap things up for tonight. And I just want to give the folks in attendance a couple of reminders. If you enjoyed this talk and you want to watch it again or share it with a friend who wasn't able to attend, CCAD will have a recording available after December 10th on our website, ccad.edu. Also there in the chat, we've dropped a survey. If you could take some time to fill that out for us, it helps us learn more about why you're here, what you'd like to see, and who you are. So take a second to do that. And also please be sure to stay connected with CCAD and with Audrey Chan. You can follow all of us on Instagram. And you can learn more about Audrey and her work at audreychan.net. Thank you all so much. And have a fantastic rest of your evening. We hope we see you back here sometime soon at CCAD's virtual lectures. Good night, everybody.
Thank you. Take care.